So at this point, I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you again very much indeed for joining us. My name is Dr. Souad Ali. I am the founding chair of the ASU Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies. I am the head of Classics and Middle Eastern Studies and head of the Arabic Studies program in the School of International Letters and Cultures, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Arizona State University. I'm very happy to meet with you today for our lecture series for the fall 2024. This is our second lecture with our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Daisy Khan. Before I introduce her, I would like to give you a background about the Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies. The Council of Arabic Islamic Studies was established at Arizona State University to acknowledge the significant contributions of Arabic studies and Islamic civilization and cultures to the world at large, both historically and in the modern age. The Council's research and teaching programs seek to promote multiculturalism, diversity and inclusion, interfaith dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and the expansion of human civilization and cultures through Arabic, as well as other Middle Eastern languages, including Persian and Turkish. And we hope to add Urdu, and we had Hindi before. And at this point, the main languages we have are Arabic and Hebrew, and we do Persian at times. The Council seeks to develop constructive academic and cultural interaction and partnerships between ASU and similar groups in the Arab and Muslim worlds at large, and also throughout the United States. My own conviction has always been literature is often conceived as a cultural tool towards greater human understanding. The more we study others' literary arts, cultures, and civilizations, the better enabled we become to achieve understanding and to work toward world peace, hopefully. At this point, please allow me to introduce Dr. Daisy Khan. She has a very long CV, so we're gonna just, because of limited time, give you highlights of her credentials. Dr. Daisy Khan is a Kashmiri American Islamic campaigner, reformer, and the executive director of the Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality, WISE. She is dedicated to peace building, equality, and justice for Muslims worldwide, especially Muslim women. Dr. Khan is a prominent media commentator on topics such as Muslim women's rights, Islam in America, Islamophobia, and the violent extremism. In 2017, she published the report Wise Up, Knowledge Ends Extremism, to combat hate and extremism and promote peace. Her memoir, Born with Wings, was released by Random House in April of 2018. And of course, her newly book that she's going to talk to us about today, is 30 Rights of Muslim Women. Dr. Khan has received significant recognition for her work, including being listed among Time Magazine's 100 most influential people and the Huffington Post top 10 women faith leaders. And more magazines described her as a link between moderate Islam and the West. And of course, she has received several numerous awards. And at this point, her speech today is going to be about her book, 30 Rights of Muslim Women, and as described by some of the publishers, 30 Rights of Muslim Women by Daisy Khan is a transformative work that delves into the intrinsic rights of women as prescribed by the Islamic teachings. Dr. Khan meticulously outlines these rights across educational, economic, legal, social, political, and spiritual domains, providing both historical context and contemporary relevance. She sheds light on the Quranic verses and Hadith narratives that advocate for women's rights, emphasizing the importance of education, financial independence, legal protection, social respect, political participation, and spiritual equality. By addressing common misconceptions and highlighting real-world applications, Dr. Khan's book empowers Muslim women to reclaim their right, place, in society and inspires a broader movement for gender equality within the Islamic faith. And at this point, I'm going to have her talk about her book. And please join me without any further ado to welcome Dr. Daisy Khan. Dr. Khan, the floor is yours. Is she unmuted, Khan?
Okay, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much. Professor Souad Ali, I really appreciate this opportunity once again. We have known each other for many years, and I have had sweet, sweet memories of coming to ASU and engaging with your students. So I'm really excited to be here today to once again go into a deep dive conversation about the 30 rights of Muslim women, but really about the state of the world and how we can fix things at our own level.
Your
But
camera is not
Yeah,
on. Can you open your camera, please? Your camera is muted.
is it unmuted now?
No, we just see the name, but we don't see the.
Okay, that's because the PowerPoint presentation is here.
Oh,
So,
you're sharing the PowerPoint
yeah,
now?
because I'm sharing right now, right?
Oh, okay, that's okay then.
Yeah.
no, you are not sharing right now. Can you
Yeah, you can share again. You
yeah,
can unmute your camera and then click on
Okay,
share.
I'm unmuted now, right? Can you see me
Ye-
now? I
yes,
mean, the camera's on now.
yes,
Can you see me?
yeah. Can you
Okay.
please share the PowerPoint once again?
Yes. Hold on a second. I have to go back.
Yes,
Sorry about that.
it's okay.
We thought it was already shared. Okay. Can you see me now? And can you see the share?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Professor Souad. And really excited to be here with each and every one of you. And, you know, I don't know. I think that I have personally come to this work, and my trajectory has been very different. So today I would like to share with you, or with all of you who are probably much younger than I am, and on your way to shaping the world, of how somebody like me was able to come to assuming a mantle that I had never imagined for myself. So it's a little bit of a trajectory of how you come to take on big charges in your life, and how you assume that charge, and what you can do with the mandate that has been thrust upon you. So I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that first. So I was born in Kashmir, as was already mentioned, and I was a third daughter, and everyone was expecting a boy. Unfortunately, for some reason, in certain cultures, boys were highly prized, and girls were considered to be, just mothers, not bringing in any assets or having some financial contribution to the home. But my grandfather was an engineer and a self-taught scholar. And he was very angry when he came to the house and noticed that I had kind of been, left to the side. And so he came up and he put me up in his cashmere shawl and pronounced to everybody that I was a gift from God. And so therefore I would be treated the same way as everybody else in the household. And he also had this verse of the Quran that says Rabbi zidni ilma, which means God increase me in knowledge, and it was plastered all over the house. So education and knowledge seeking was was part of the family tradition. And I witnessed at a very young age when my grandfather wrote his first book, and what an impression that left on me, and what it was like to put that book together, to disseminate it to people, and the excitement of seeing somebody write a book, even though he was an engineer. And he wrote a book on religion. So I led a privileged life. I enjoyed all the rights afforded to a boy. I played sports, learned music, painted murals, and then I was eventually sent to America to pursue an education in the arts, because in Kashmir at the time, there were only two noble professions that women could get into. One was teaching, and one was being a doctor. And I didn't want to be either because I was an artist brain. And so that sent me off to America to pursue an education in America. And my earliest memory of my childhood, which is still seared in my brain, is this image of this. Okay. Why can't I move to the next slide now? All right. It was working before, so what could it be?
Use the arrow down to the next slide.
I did. I tried all the arrows. I tried up arrow, and I'm trying the arrow. Just give me 1 second. I'll add a mouse.
Sure.
Sorry about that. Sometimes a mouse does it. Okay. Well,
working.
The mouse saved the day. Amazing about that. So anyway, this is an image I remember very distinctly. This red hanging, boxing gloves are being dangled in front of me. And years later, I asked my dad, why did you ever give me a pair of boxing gloves? And he said, yes. And I said, why? He said, because you were the third of 3 daughters, and I wanted to teach you how to defend yourself. So I gave you those pair of boxing gloves so you learned how to defend yourself. So years later, of course, I forgot about these boxing gloves, but they're in my memory. Years later, I focused my energy. I came to America, like many of you who are going to school right now. I was going to school. I began a successful career in interior architecture. I began to work for Fortune 500 companies. Here we go. Next. Here's a Fortune 500. I was in New York. I was in a Fortune 500 company. I was a statistic. I was one of the early Muslims that came to America. I was a working woman living the American dream. At that time, many women had just started entering the workforce, especially in corporate America. And I never thought of myself as a Muslim woman. I was simply a woman who happened to have a corporate career. But then I got married, and I married an imam, and I became another statistic. I became an imam's wife, which was very unusual for a corporate woman, a woman of a career, to be married to an imam. I began to help with premarital counseling. I helped with funerals, birthrights. Although I had my profession at the time, I was still a working woman. Because he was my husband, I had to help him with his community work. And during this time, the line between what a woman could do in private and what she could do in public was very unclear. So I was actually charting my own course. And I remember distinctly asking my father-in-law, who was also a scholar, a preeminent scholar. He had written so many books on Islam, and he was an Azhari scholar, from Al-Azhar. He had graduated from there. I asked him because people were now asking me to step up and do more things. And I remember I got a request saying, can you do an adhan, meaning the call to prayer, for like a morning breakfast? Somebody had heard it and thought it was such a beautiful thing. And I said, well, I don't think so. I don't think it can be done. I knew how to do the adhan because I was leading women in prayer in my community. And so I asked him if I could lead the prayer publicly, because I just didn't know. I'd never seen that. And of course, he immediately said, oh, no, 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 a woman cannot do that. And I said, why? And he said, oh, because a woman's voice is considered to be her private part, which, by the way, is the argument that is being used today in Afghanistan, where women are being denied the right to speak in public. So this is this is something that is very much in the recesses of the minds of even the most evolved scholars. And he was a very evolved scholar, a very progressive scholar. And I was so shocked. And I said to him, well, I don't understand. If a woman can do the recitation of the Quran in public, why can't she do the call to prayer in public? And then he just looked at me and he said, you're too naughty. you're right, it makes no sense. And he pretty much said to me, go ahead and do what you need to do. And then, of course, I started doing that. So I had started assuming a little bit of a public role in the community, but I was still working away. And then, as many of you know, 9/11 happened. And this is when my life changed dramatically. And there was this little old lady who asked me this question. I went to a little church and she asked me this question about Muslim women. And I had already been speaking I'd already done some, measure of public speaking here and there. And I remember telling her that Muslim women had received rights in 7th century, the rights that even Western women didn't have until recently, like the right to divorce. And so then she asked me very gently, she said, I believe you, dear, because she was a very sincere woman. And then she said, I just want to know what you're doing about it. These are the moments when somebody is speaking to you who's a 80-year-old gray-haired woman, but what she is saying is not really coming from her, it's coming from a higher power. She is like she's like the messenger of something that I needed to hear at that time. So I heard that and I took that as, oh my God, what am I doing about it? I am an empowered Muslim woman. I'm living in America. I've been empowered by everybody. I'm married to an imam. Then if not me, then who? And that question really changed my life. And for the first time, I began to feel the burden of what it means to be a Muslim woman. And even though I was an architectural designer, and I was a highly unlikely candidate to do anything other than assist my husband, but I accepted this mandate because it was coming from a higher power. And this is what I'm sharing the story with you, because there might be moments in your life where you have to step up and take on something that you did not even expect, for you. So I then decided that instead of building buildings and helping corporate America, that I would dedicate my life to building a community. And that is when I founded WISE, Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality. And I started this movement after I learned about the suffragettes. As you know, they also fought the big fight to get the right to vote in America, and they were not getting anywhere. And then they basically decided to use the arguments of faith, like, if we're all created in the image of God and we're endowed by the Creator with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, then why is a woman denied the right to vote? So I thought, what a great idea to use faith-based arguments to fight for the rights that are you're divinely endowed with. Not just a state is giving you these rights, but these are rights that the Creator has given you. So this is WISE. So I brought all these amazing women from all over the globe together. You can see there's like a couple of hundred of them, and we were all strategizing and discussing all the issues that happen to women all over the globe. And it was the first such convening in the world where women had come together, sort of like the Beijing when 1,200 or 1,600 women came together to do the Beijing Declaration. This was kind of our way of like coming together. You could see this is the entire globe, from women from all over the globe, and many of them are leaders of who lead differently. They're not all scholars. They're activists, scholars, media commentators, opinion leaders, and so it's an incredible array of women, and we learned a lot from each other. And then the strangest thing happened, that as an imam's wife, I now had assumed this responsibility, and I was kind of in a position of authority. And there was I was mentoring a couple, and the couple, this is marriage counseling, and a couple asked me if I could officiate a marriage for them. And I said, oh, women aren't allowed to officiate marriages. This was my answer to them. They don't officiate marriages. And so they looked at me and they said, yes, but we're very comfortable with you. Can you please officiate our marriage? So I went to my husband and I said, can a woman officiate a marriage? And he said, oh, there's no problem. Of course, you can. Women don't, because it's typically not done. But if your community needs you, you have to step up, and it's okay. So I officiated my first marriage. But when I was about to do conduct this first marriage, the uncle of the bride refused to come, because he said, if a woman is officiating marriage, I'm not coming to the wedding. And it was, so there was this 1 week before frantic, conversations going on. And so what did we do? We picked up the phone and we called up Al Azhar, which is, one of the premier Sunni universities or Sunni seminaries in the world. And we asked them on their hotline, by the way, they had a hotline. And we called the hotline and we said, can a woman officiate a marriage? And they said, oh, yeah. Women have been officiating marriages in, we have mazunas here. No problem. Go ahead. And that's what it took. Just a fatwa from, because women were appointed already to conducting marriages. So I became the first woman that began to officiate, a Muslim woman officiating marriages in America. And this is something, you break the mold. And now today, many other women are doing that. And then there was a time when a woman called me from Florida saying her brother-in-law had pronounced triple talaq, meaning I divorce thee, I divorce thee, I divorce thee verbally. This is very common in some Muslim countries where women, divorce is pronounced verbally. And when you say it 3 times, it basically means you are divorced and that's it. And I told this woman, she was from Florida, and I said, in America, a divorce is only valid when a judge recognizes it. Your husband can say whatever he wants to say. And I asked her if this man had gone insane when he had done that. And because I had learned all these things, and we have something called temporary insanity in America. That's the same exact thing. It works like that in Islam also. So the woman said, yes, he went crazy and he just pronounced it. He was mad. And so I said, well, then she's not divorced. And then she called me next day and she said, I believe everything you're saying, but can you get a man to deliver this message to us? Because they will not believe what you're saying, because I was a woman and something coming from me was considered not valid. But if a man said it, then it would be considered valid. So I had an intern, his name was James, and I asked him if he could come over because he spoke Arabic and he was a gender studies student. And I asked him, can you deliver this message to them? And it was James who delivered this message to them, and it was accepted. So I learned all these issues that happen in the community literally at the ground level, like experientially. I experienced all these things. And there was a woman who contacted me while we were in the mosque, and she said that her husband was about to marry another woman. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, he's decided to take a second wife. And this was very funny because I asked her, okay, if he's doing that, who's conducting the marriage? She said, oh, he's conducting the marriage himself. I said, well, who are the witnesses? And she said, let me find out. So we asked him who the witnesses were, and he told her the angels were his witnesses. So that's when I put down the gauntlet and I said, look, tell your husband to bring the 2 angels with him tomorrow to the mosque so we can get a signature and then we can validate the marriage in person. Of course, that didn't happen. And the marriage didn't go forward and it was over. But I'm telling you all these things because some of these things are actually comical of what people will try to do. So, how people will misuse or misconstrue or weaponize religion for their own personal gain. And a lot of it actually affects women because women are oppressed, and you can see that right now playing out in Afghanistan. And so I also realized that the best chance of combating these injustices in the name of our faith is to construct religiously grounded arguments to lift the truth of Islam, like I was doing in each one of these incidences where I knew what to say because I had already learned it. I knew what the arguments were, and I was arguing back. And because this truth has inspired such positive social change for more than 1400 years. And so we have to repeat it, and we have to highlight it, and we have to bring it forth. So then, in that moment, I realized why my father had given me these boxing gloves. I mean, this was my arena. These boxing gloves were not meant to do the physical fight. These boxing gloves is a metaphor for you getting strong and learning how to defend yourself, and for you to walk into this arena, to step into the arena that you need to step into to fight the big fight. And the truth is that there are 5 reasons why we must lift the truth of Islam. Number 1, the faith of Islam has never restricted women from interpreting or expressing their faith. In the West, Muslim women's suffering is attributed to Islam itself. And in Muslim majority nations, women are essential to preserving tradition, thereby keeping Islam alive. I mean, this is something that I'm watching in Afghanistan right now, because right now, they're saying in order to preserve what we have to preserve the dignity of a woman. So the dignity of a woman is that a woman shouldn't even step outside the house. She has to remain indoors. So because they are claiming that this is how you keep Islam pure and this is how you keep Islam alive. Of course, they're wrong. This is not what the Quran says, but that's the perception and that's the reality that we're dealing with. 4, women's struggle for emancipation is always linked to their fight for justice. And in Muslim majority and Muslim women increasingly want to define themselves through their religion, not in spite of their religion. And this is something that we are seeing even in Christian communities and in other communities where, religion is taking a major role in mobilizing and in fighting for your rights. And we are seeing that here in the United States with Roe versus Wade. So how did we get that thing reversed? Because there were Christian women who were highly motivated, and they used all the arguments they could find in their arsenal, in their scripture, one interpretation of the scripture that they went with and legislated and lobbied, and they got Roe versus Wade reversed. So you can mobilize for good, and you can also mobilize for the bad. So what I'm saying is that, oftentimes the answers do lie within our faiths, and we just don't realize. So here I am, a year after I had started WISE, I got this frantic call from a Saudi historian who had attended the conference. And she said that the people who managed the custodian sites had decided to move the women from the prayer area and outside the prayer area to another area. In other words, women have traditionally prayed in the same area. You could see men and women are mixed up together. This is me very recently in Saudi Arabia. You can see men and women are milling around. They're even praying together in the same area. So they had decided that they wanted to move women out so they could make space for men. And so she was very alarmed because she's a historian. She said, this has never happened. This is the tradition during since the time of the Prophet. And how can they do this? And what can we do? And now, thankfully, I had created WISE already. So there were a couple of hundred women that I already had in my network. I sent an email, the same email that I got to everybody. And one woman said, oh my God, I know how to do petitions. I'm a queen of petitions. And so she took on a petition called Grand Mosque Equal Access for Muslim Women. It was a big name. That's what it was called. And she worked overnight, drank a pot of coffee, and by morning she had the petition ready. And we circulated the petition. And in the petition, we also made people put comments into the petition, and so we got comments like, follow the Prophet's example. There will be a mutiny. This is our holy site. And then I forwarded, we got almost 2,000 signatures, and I forwarded the petition to the historian, and she took this petition to the king at the time. And he was so happy. He said, thank you. And because he said that, these petitions have been delivered from all over the world. So it was external pressure coming from around the world. And the king said, this is what we needed, because he couldn't do anything because the decision was being made by other people. And so he needed the ammunition from all of us from around the world, because this is our holy site. This doesn't belong to one country. So the whole issue was dropped, and the whole idea of moving the women was dropped. And when I went to Umrah, which is a mini Hajj, you know, I felt all my foremothers, Hagar, Khadija, Fatima, Aisha, Sumayya, Salama, and all those others who lived in this area, who were at this same structure. I felt like they were applauding me for remaining steadfast and having courage in God. And this, to me, is the power of networks and numbers. And I'm sharing this with you because, you know, oftentimes we try to do many campaigns, and you know, we do them solo and we do them on social media, but there is power in numbers. And so if you're going to make any change, you need people behind you. You need a lot of people, you know, you need to mobilize people that are like-minded people, and then try to push for legislation. This is how it works. Things don't happen just because you post something on social media. That's not where the change occurs. Anyway, so we continued working with women around the world, and we issued many opinion papers. You can see some of these opinion papers. I created a Muslim Women's Shura Council, and the council was, again, this was a strategy that came from the women. The women said, you know, if people are telling us that domestic violence is sanctioned in Islam, then we have to fight it, and we have to show scriptural evidence that it's not. And if people are doing female genital mutilation and they're saying it's Islamic, then how are we supposed to fight that? So we began to issue position papers one after the other, and each of these position papers was literally heavily researched, very well thought out, 30 pages. Some of these are actually on our website. You're happy to take a look at it. And so, you know, the position paper that we did for female genital mutilation was used by a woman in Gambia who had been fighting female genital mutilation in Africa using medical arguments, but she was not having much success. So when she came to the conference and she requested that we do this paper, and we gave the paper to her, she walked into a colloquium of African imams and asked them for 5 minutes and showed them a digested version of this paper. And the digested version was literally 2 pages long, front and back. And it showed all the key arguments against FGM, all the Quranic arguments, the prophetic arguments, the juridical arguments, every scientific argument. And so they were so stunned, they said, we are issuing a fatwa right now. Now, this is all recorded in my book, so you can actually see how it happened. And then after getting a fatwa from this colloquium of imams, she started doing imam trainings one by one, literally starting from 2011, 2012, year by year, collecting more imams, and showing them the evidence. And in 2018, Gambia banned the practice. And I was there when I went. I met with the vice president of Gambia, and she told me, she said, this was the missing piece of the puzzle that we needed. And so she thanked me that the position paper had been so helpful. Recently, you may have heard a story that in Gambia, there was an imam who tried to reverse this ban, and he didn't succeed. You know why? Because we had trained so many imams, and we trained so many of the medical nurses who were all men. I remember when I went there in 2018, I met all these nurses. They were all in the room, and they were so excited because they're the ones who are creating the interference between the families and the practitioners. They're the ones who are telling the families, you can't do this. Because once again, we changed their mindset, we gave them evidence, we showed proof. And same thing with child marriage. This paper you're not seeing the paper here, but we started training imams in Afghanistan. And we started with 20 imams. We went all the way to 6,000 imams, spent enormous amount of time, one-on-one, 20 imams at a time, showing them how child marriage is not sanctioned in Islam. And I remember, you know, there was an imam who was then giving a sermon about this. And by the way, I'm telling you all these stories, they all exist in the book because I want you to know what is in the book, but it's in much more detail. So here, we didn't have this level of detail when we were doing this, but now I did research, I detailed it, I showed evidence, real evidence. So any of you that are interested in gender studies and Islamic studies, we will be, doing lessons and on each of these rights. So, reach out to me if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into these rights. But same thing happened when the Imam was giving his khutbah. He was talking about how child marriage is terrible. It doesn't work. It's harmful to the girl, harmful to the family. And there was this man who ran up to him and said, "Why didn't you tell us this before? I married all my daughters. I forcibly married all my daughters. They're all miserable. I married them young." And then the Imam looked at him and said, "I know it's too late for you, but it's not late for the people that are here." So right now in Afghanistan, when people are talking about child marriage, we have 6,000 imams that have already been trained on this. They have already received the information. So we actually have something that is helping us to, against the tradition of throwing girls and getting them married to 60-year-olds. If you remember, that was happening a lot during the Taliban. But a lot of these imams are refusing to do this now. So, in 2018, something interesting happened. I had an intern who explained something to me, and she talked about her harrowing experience of trying to avoid forced marriage. When she said that she was being forcibly married, I always thought that forced marriage was something that happened overseas. And it's something that I didn't have to worry about in America. But here she was talking about forced marriage. And then she said, since I was 12 years old, my immigrant parents would take me annually to my native country to introduce me to potential suitors. And to avoid this, I ran away from home. And then, she was also extremely smart. So she had applied for a scholarship, and she got a Truman Scholarship. So it was fully funded. So when she ran away from home, she had something to back her up with. And her story really distressed me, because I realized, oh my God, this is happening in my own neighborhood, in my own backyard. So I asked her, what can WISE do for you? I mean, you're here. And she said, well, it's one of the reasons I came to intern for you, is because I wanted to see what you can do. So she said to me, she said, I looked for all this information online. I could never find anything, and no one could help me. And I couldn't argue with my parents because they didn't know how to argue. So can you put a manual together? Can you put these rights together somewhere online? And so what started out as a manual soon evolved into a full-fledged book. So this is what this manual took me 4 years, because it literally started with, one right, two rights, so things that we had heard. And then people kept asking me for more, because there was something happening, somebody that was rape stigmatization in some country. And they asked me, oh, can you talk about that? Then somebody said, well, can you talk about reproductive rights? So we were getting this from our network from all over the globe. So I put all of this together in one place in a very concise way, easy to understand. The path was not simple. As I said, my research took years. And despite not being a native Arabic speaker, I found myself venturing into all kinds of uncharted territory. I explored the world of jurisprudence. I learned how to read commentaries of people. I got into exegesis, and I learned about narratives, women's narratives that were completely unheard of even to me. And I thought I knew a lot, but I was quite surprised. It became my own sort of way of spiritually growing, because I was learning so much. As many of you do research, you know how much you learn from when you're doing research. My traveling companions, I had traveling companions, and my traveling companions were other people's books. I did not chart out on this journey by myself. I was looking at the writings of extraordinary women scholars who have written enormous works, detailed, beautifully researched books. But no one ever sees those books except students like you, because a lot of these books are written for academia and for academic use. They're not really used. They never really drill down into the communities. And so so their writings were like stars in the night sky, because their writings led me to a much deeper understanding of the truths of the Quran. So my research became a lot easier because I was relying on women scholars and what they were saying. While writing, you might be wondering, what did I observe? While I was writing, I observed there was a distinct pattern in the Quran. God doesn't always choose the best or the most experienced individuals to serve God's mission. Like, I'm a very good example of that. I'm not a scholar. I'm a lay jurist. I've learned everything on the job. But here I am, an architectural designer, being thrust with a responsibility that I decided to assume the responsibility wouldn't have happened had I walked away. I wouldn't be doing any of this work. But here I am, kind of picked by God. Do this assignment. I want you to do this for me, because I don't do anything without knowing that, that it's coming from a higher source. But from the Quran itself, I noticed that God doesn't always choose the best and the most experienced individual to serve God's mission. God actually favored a lot of unexpected, insecure, defective, skeptics, underdog, and a lot of women that God chose are single women, widowed women, separated women, childless women, and everyone has a role to play. And regardless of their circumstances, each of us can make a difference, particularly those of us who have a will. So in the 30 rights, I delved into these details of the Quran because I really wanted to prove how, from God's point of view, how these rights are from God's point of view. And I provided the historical support for women's rights, and everything from the right to life, intellect, religion, dignity, family, and wealth. And these are the 6 objectives of Sharia that the rights fall under. The book clarifies how Islamic faith empowers women to express or interpret their faith. You will read many, many poignant anecdotes of women who uplifted their communities and shaped our destinies. These are luminous historical figures whose impact continues to reverberate today. I mean, yeah, they're in the recesses of history, and they've not been brought out in the way that they should be brought out, but many of them had a sizable impact on Islamic civilization. Some of them rescued prophets, some were martyred, some acted, they taught, they issued decrees, they advised leaders, they debated as equals, they cured the ill, and many even fought in battles. So I often, try to tell the people in Afghanistan that there was a time in 7th century when women were fighting on the battlefield, and today women are being told that they need to be protected. And meanwhile, the women themselves were protecting the prophet, and they were fighting side by side with him. And yet we have a people, Taliban, who say that, Islam forbids women from even stepping out of the house. So I wrote this book with many people in mind, especially people who are activists, seekers, people who are jurists, people who want to change the world, and who are also passionate about learning and passionate about their faith, or passionate about finding the intersection between faith, spirituality, and religion. Like, there's real intersectionality between all of this. And I'm very excited to release this book. It's my treasured gift to all of you, which I've been preparing for years. And it covers everything from family to spirituality. And I will take you through some of the rights. So it addresses civic and political leadership, how secular education, because this is an issue in Afghanistan right now. Sorry, I don't know why it's coming up. That's a mistake. Freedom of speech and expression, testimony and witness, religion and spiritual leadership, to be a jurist and interpreter of Islamic texts, to gain spiritual knowledge, to access religious spaces, because a lot of times women are told that they can't enter a mosque or should not come to a mosque. So I addressed that and showed how the Prophet's mosque was it was almost like a community center where men and women were coming in, going out. It was a very thriving, dynamic space. There's a whole section on marriage, which goes into all the issues of marriage, forced marriage, child marriage, polygamous marriage, divorce. Then there's the issue of inheritance, financial independence and equal pay, owning property. Some of these are jumping around. Reproductive rights. I actually mention reproductive rights in this book. And I also talk about reproductive rights, how the Islamic position on reproductive rights could actually be useful in America right now. Care of orphans through adoption. This is an issue because there are so many orphans around the world, and people don't adopt them because they think adoption is not permitted. To motherhood and womanhood. This is to show that motherhood and womanhood is two sides of the same coin. In other words, women can be mothers and they can be also, have full agency to do what else they want to do. Freedom of movement, expression of modesty. As many of you know, this is a very big issue all over the world, in Iran especially, and even in Afghanistan. Freedom from domestic violence, to safeguard against FGM. We talked about that. The freedom to movement is very key right now because Afghan women are told they can't step out of the house without a male companion. Protection from rape, sexual assault, and adultery. To fulfill being a trustee of God. So this shows that how every human being is a steward of God, according to our scripture. The freedom from gossip, slander, libel, defamation, and privacy. This is an interesting article because it addresses the issue of what's happening to all of us these days with social media, how slander, libel, gossip defamation has become so prevalent because people can just use their keyboard and say anything they want. But there are real rules to slander and libel and defamation in Islam because people, number one, value their life, and number two, they value their reputation. And that's why slander, defamation is a crime in Islam. And then to safeguard honor, I wrote this because many women are honor killed, and I wanted to show that there was no basis in Islam for honor killing. Honor killing is actually murder. It's nothing honorable. Then I also added an article on safeguarding against child and human trafficking because there's a lot of human trafficking that happens during wartime, and oftentimes children are sold into slavery or sold into the hands of traffickers. To safeguard the family, like in Afghanistan, sometimes children are handed over to another family. Just take them or marry them or whatever, just so they can save the rest of the family. So this actually shows you what a child's rights are. Health and hygiene is also an important topic because it affects women if women are not given health services that they need because they have specific needs. So as I was writing this book, I actually felt very comfortable in 7th century. This is something that people ask me, what surprised you the most? What surprised me the most is I felt very comfortable in 7th century. Women were very central to developing and propagating their religion, their faith, but they were also playing a very active role, the kind of role that I'm playing today. They were everywhere. The battle, but today, the battle that is being fought by Muslim women is twofold. On the one hand, there are Islamophobes who insist that Islam oppresses women, and many of you who are Muslim know that and experience that. This is an idea that got fueled by mainstream Western media, who took images of women who were being oppressed and subjugated and lumped all other 750 or billion Muslim women into that bucket. So that's just not true. On the other hand, there are zealots. There are extremists who mistake cultural misogyny for religious practice. And this is being played out in Afghanistan right now. So throughout this book, I debunk these myths. I debunk all of these myths, whether they are propagated by extremists, Taliban, or any other group that weaponizes religion against women, but also against Islamophobia. So the book has two purposes. The book describes how Islam starts literally with the first couple, Adam and Eve, because without Eve, there would be no progeny, no family, no community, no society, and literally no civilization. So it shows how important a woman is to civilization, to life itself. A woman is literally a creator. She's a co-creator. She has been endowed by God to bring life into this world. So without a woman, there would be no life, no further life. And so therefore, a woman has to be respected for that and the important role that she plays. So it also shows how the Quran actually celebrates a feminine voice. Oftentimes we are told a woman cannot speak, but here you have a feminine voice being invited back by God to speak. And there's a verse called Mujadala 58:1, and it says, God has heard the word of a woman who was arguing with you concerning a husband. There was a woman who was complaining to the prophet about her husband because he tried to divorce her on the basis that she was his mother. And so she was complaining to the prophet, and this complaint was raised all the way up to God, and a revelation was sent in response to her, saying that God is listening and constantly the seer. So in other words, her voice, this Arabian woman's argument and the problem she raises, and the whole dynamic, it's brought into as if it's a whole dynamic in the form of which justice is being sought. And so God is saying that I'm listening to a woman's voice and her complaint. But how would God listen if the woman was not even complaining openly? She was complaining openly in public. So this is something that I bring to the attention of the Taliban, and I'm going to Afghanistan and I'm speaking to them and I'm telling them the verse of the Quran, Mujadala, actually talks about a woman debating the prophet or speaking openly with the prophet. Then there's another very important incident, which actually was the reason why the most important verse in the Quran that deals with women and men's equality actually occurred, because one of the wives of the prophet asked the prophet, why does God only speak, why does God only mention men or address men in the Quran? In other words, the revelations are coming down and they're mostly speaking about men. And her question was so significant, and that the Quran's orientation and the orientation of the revelations changed. And one of the most beautiful verses came down, and the verse says, for Muslim men and women, for believing men and women, for true men and women, for men and women who are patient and serene, for men and women who humble themselves, for men and women who give in charity, for men and women who fast, for men and women who guard their chastity, for men and women who are constant remembrance of God. For them, God has prepared forgiveness and a great reward. So this is a verse that many people are shocked by, because it is a verse that actually shows parity between men and women in terms of their spirituality and their responsibility. It also shows, from the beginning of Islam, how women filled diverse and crucial roles in their societies. These women were intermediaries. They were divinely charged as wives, women, mothers who protected, sheltered, influenced, taught, and disseminated the prophetic message. So in other words, women were not just engaged in warfare. Some of the women were actually divinely charged with the message. And many of these women, just like the prophets, endured great hardships because they resisted the powerful and the mighty, and they also exemplified the ideals of courage in the face of diversity. We have many women that I can speak about, but I can very briefly just mention the story of Hagar. Many of you know she was Abraham's wife. She's mentioned in the Bible and is a key figure in Islam and the archetype of courage and conviction. And she had a young son named Ishmael, and there was dispute in the family, and God instructed Abraham to leave her in another place, to take her away from the home that he lived in and move her somewhere else and take her to another place. And so he left her in a desolate valley, which is today's Mecca, the image that I showed you earlier of the Kaaba. And she was left alone there. And while she was alone, her son got thirsty, so she ran between two hills looking for water. And then this spring of water gushed out, and she screamed Zamzam, meaning, hold, whatever. And she created a well out of that water. And that once you have a well in the desert, basically, the town flourishes, and everybody started flocking to this. But she was the founder. I tell people, you don't want to admit it, but she was the founder of Mecca. She literally was the one who was making sure whoever gets the water, they have the water rights. And she raised her son in this valley, and the valley flourished. And today we have Mecca. So you have all these incredible roles that women have played. There's Asiya, who is the Pharaoh's wife, and the first adopter of a child. I think in the Christian tradition, they say she was his daughter, but she adopted Pharaoh. Of course, there's Mary, as you know who Mary is. I don't have to tell you this, but Mary brought Jesus into this world. Without her, there would be no Jesus, and she had to deal with the consequences of being a single mother and the taunting that she got from people. There's Khadija, who's so prominent, the first wife of the Prophet. She was a philanthropist. She was an entrepreneur. She was older than the Prophet. She offered marriage to him. He accepted. They lived a beautiful life as a couple. They were the couple, the most important couple in Mecca, until he received the revelation. And then when he got the revelation, she was the first person he ran to. And, they were successful. They were in trading business. And overnight he became a prophet. And now she supported him throughout his prophecy with the money that she had, even though her tribe was sanctioned by the Meccans and thrown out, and they were starved. You hear of sanctions today. You hear of warfare today. Some of these things were happening at that time also. And there are real lessons in how they were dealing with it. And so you have all these examples, and then there's an example of Queen of Sheba. And because today in Afghanistan and in some other countries, they say that a woman cannot be a leader. And by the way, in America, we still haven't had a woman president because we have the same issues that somehow we don't think a woman can be more qualified. So, the Quran talks about a Queen of Sheba as being, she's hailed as an archetype of a good political leader because of her transparency, relying on public consultation, and the priority she placed on the welfare of her people. And she's contrasted against the Pharaoh, the archetype of tyranny, showing that powerful women can be righteous and true. And so, today, we could look around the world and say to ourselves, wow, we really need more women in leadership roles so we can prevent this warfare. So we can actually focus on the welfare of the people and not warfare. So there are so many luminary women that I mentioned in the book. There's not enough time to go through each and every one of them. In fact, one of the comments I got about the book is how many great stories of how many women there were that really shaped our destinies. So you have those, and then of course paired up with that, the book is a toolkit for women to fight their own battles, because I can't be in every corner of the world, as many of you know. So these are some of the women that I mentioned in the book. Fatima Al-Fihri, she created the oldest university, which was incorporated into, like the oldest running degree granting university was was started by a Muslim woman, and it's still standing today, and it's in the Guinness Book of World Records. So here are some examples of some other women. I'm going to just scan them very quickly. She's an expert in arithmetic, and inheritance calculations. Here is Fatima al-Madrid. She was famous for including astronomical and mathematical treaties. She corrected the almagest of Ptolemy and found mistakes in the eclipse calculation. I mean, this is the level of women that we have had in the past. And then this is Nana Asmua. She was a princess, poet, and teacher, and she established the Yantura system in Nigeria. And these women would go, once they would get certified, they would go to towns and places and teach others. Amazing kind of stories. And Lubna, she was a master librarian, acquisition expert. And then you have Zubaydah. She was a driving force, a main sponsor behind the famed Baitul Hikmah, which had, 500,000 books in it. And she was the key sponsor. And today you have somebody like Hashima Hassan. So I also show a lot of contemporary women in the book. So the book is bookended. On the one side, I show women who are ancient, women who have medieval women who have played a sizable role. But then I also end it with a contemporary woman who's, basically living out her own legacy. And, many of you know Dr. Hassan. She is, one of the chief scientists behind the Webb telescope, where we saw those incredible images recently, I think just last year. So, you have all these heads of state, previous and present heads of state that are leading Muslim nations or have led Muslim nations. So again, there is no restriction to women, being involved in this work. So this book, in a nutshell, is like my boxing gloves. It's a shield against oppression, but it's also a hammer against injustice. I traveled to Afghanistan right after the pullout, and I met the Taliban face to face. And at the education ministry, I had an opportunity to speak briefly with them. I explained to them how the Quran does not make any distinction between education for boys and girls, and that how I was sent to America to pursue an education by my grandfather, who really believed in the verse of the Quran that I mentioned in the opening remarks. And when I was talking to them face to face, the minister really surprised me, and he said, people in our rural areas have no knowledge of this information. Why don't you go to our provinces and teach this to the women? And then, of course, I responded, I said, I don't have jurisdiction. He said, you are welcome to come here, and we'll give you the security, and we'll give you the tools that you need, because I don't speak the language. But unfortunately, when I came back, that same minister who I had engaged with and where I saw endless possibilities was fired, because he was seen as a threat to the to the leadership in Kandahar that was making all the decisions. So we have a real battle going on, because there are a lot of people who you can transform, but you have to transform like each person one at a time, and you have to continue educating people. So knowledge and education is so key. Not information. Information is different, and knowledge and is very important. So today, I'm here with all of you. This is my contact information. The book is a toolkit. Like I said, for each and every one of you, we're developing a toolkit right now, so that anybody who really wants to use this in the communities, they can. I wear many hats. I'm a marriage officiant. I became a lay jurist. I play many roles, but I have no title. I have no robes. I don't have a turban. I don't even veil myself. And I would never compare myself to the luminaries in my faith, but I know that God gives us different blessings. So as my stage keeps enlarging, I'm no longer married to an imam, but my spirit continues to merge with all my ancestresses. So I'm gaining strength from what I'm learning from this book, because now I'm not on the defensive anymore. When I was doing work after 9/11, I was always on the defensive. I am now on an offensive. I'm now saying to people, this is the vision. This is what we are. This is who we need to be. And it's very, very empowering. So I hope that I'm turning my proverbial boxing gloves over to each and every one of you. Whoever needs them for whatever fight you're fighting, always have them with you. And we must unite, we must strategize together and breathe life into the vision of not only gender equality, but human equality, and stand on equal footing, just like, just because we are all a gift of God. So thank you so much. And I am waiting to take some of your questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Daisy, for this insightful lecture and talk and about your very important book. And at this point, I'd like to also welcome, some of my colleagues, our distinguished professor, Professor Salikich, who has written a book on Afghani women, and she works so much with Afghani women. And I will give her floor, in a minute to speak. And Dr. Mira Latouf, she just had to leave because she's teaching now, and all of the others, and of course, all of our students and guests. Thank you very much for attending. Daisy, with all of this significant work that we have been doing, your book may be the latest, and all of the other scholarship to deconstruct the misconceptions about women in Islam. I mean, my own class, Current Texts and Women, that's coming now in spring. I've been teaching this since 2007. All of the women I teach, they have spoken about that. Dr. Asma Barlas, Dr. Layla Ahmed, Harvard, Dr. Niamad Brazanji from Cornell, and Amina Wadoud, and with solid scholarship, and in addition to your very important book. Nonetheless, we see little happening in that direction. For my own, thought is the lack of democracy maybe in those countries. Afghanistan, for example, I'm teaching a class this semester about, Arabic film and media. And part of the media, coverage, we showed Afghanistan, and after the pullout of the US, and I showed them videos about Afghani women speaking and complaining about what's happening to them and what has happened to them since the pullout of, and my own, experience with the Taliban in the 1990s, when Larry King was, interviewing some of those people. I wish I had a chance to speak on the phone, and I called several times to talk to the Taliban or one of them about those misconceptions that they're doing, that you told the minister about them, and as you said, unfortunately, he was fired. So what do you envision, Daisy, with all of this scholarship that very little is happening to change the situation as far as women's rights in Islam?
Yeah. Well, I think that like you said, I was surprised at how many great books had been written. And I'm somebody who knows a fair amount, like about books and everything. But, when I was living with my husband, he had like 2,000 books. So we had every book that ever got published on any topic. But it's only when I started writing this book that I actually was delving into some of those books in detail. And my mind was opening up, but also I was finding so many solutions out there. And I personally have been dedicated to closing the gap between scholarship and the grassroots community. This is what this book does. It makes it very easy to find the right that you have in one place. And because the information is fragmented, and a lot of the books, as you know, academic books are thematic, right? They are written in a certain way about a certain topic, but nothing is written in a way that it keeps the grassroots community in mind, the activist, the person who's. So what's happening with this book now is it's becoming a teaching tool. So each write, every week, I do a lecture in Afghanistan, and I'm actually basically taking this entire one write at a time, and I'm teasing it out, and I'm showing, all the arguments for, against, what you need to know about that write. So that's one thing that's happening. Secondly, there's a toolkit that's being developed where we can push for legislation and show how to legislate for each of these rights. We have to actually get drilled down into not only policy, public awareness, policy, they all have to work together, because and then making sure that all the imams are on board, because they're the ones who have the pulpit, and they're the ones who have the ability to communicate this stuff. So I'm treating this like any other project that I would treat, which is that it has to have multiple ways of communicating. And now, as an example, I was just overseas and somebody was talking about how women's inheritance rights are being snatched away from them. Like, it's a new trend, like, because people are hearing somebody on a smartphone somewhere in another country, and they like that preacher, and that preacher saying women don't have to have right to inheritance. And all of a sudden becoming a trend, because it's advantageous to men to deny their sisters inheritance, because then they keep the whole thing. So I was told that, and I happened to have the book with me, and I said, let me tell you what the Quran says about inheritance. And I was reading that, and I was reading that was going on Facebook immediately. And then droves of people came to me and said, why don't you do a podcast? Because you're not out there. We're only hearing the other stuff. So now I will be podcasting on each of these rights. So this is the level we have to get to, because many of the people that are listening to me right now, I'm assuming all of you are younger generation, and you know how you have books, but you also consume a lot of things online on your smartphones. So some of us who are doing this work, we need to understand how the new world is, and we need to adapt to it. And that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take what's in the book, not waste it. And many of the scholars that you mentioned, Professor Souad, are all in my book. Each and every one of these women whose names you mentioned, they're all in the book, and you'll recognize them because I had to lean on their writings also. So
thank you very much indeed. At this point, I'd like to give Professor Sally Kitch the floor. Sally, the floor is yours. You can unmute. Can you unmute her? Nayan?
Yes, I have given them the permission.
Okay. Sally, are you still there?
She's here. I tried to unmute her also. Oh, yeah, she's unmuted now.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Oh,
Thank you for coming, Sally. How are you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
Thank you. I'm okay. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to see you and hear from you, Daisy. You are full of surprises, and your accomplishments are just legion. I can't tell you enough how much I admire the work that you've done and the approach that you take, and how important this new book is going to be. My question is specific.
Daisy, before Sally's question, can you unshare? You don't have to share now, so that we have the.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Sally, to interrupt. Go ahead, Sally.
Can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I wanted to ask specifically about Afghanistan. As you know, I'm been very involved with some Afghan women who have faced unbelievable horrors. And I wondered if you have any sense that you or others representing your work, including our mutual friends in Afghanistan, might actually be able to make a dent in this relentless oppression that seems to get worse by the week. Do you have any sense of hope or, any kind of positive feelings about what might be able to be done there?
Yeah. So the work that we've done in Afghanistan with the religious leaders, we also were in partnership with the friend that you were speaking about. We had actually started training even the women madrasa principals, because we thought these were women who were connected with the men somehow. And they also were running their own madrasas. They had the girls' madrasas. And it turns out that this is going to be the most valuable group of people that we now have in our arsenal, because the Taliban has decided to increase the madrasas by 10 folds, maybe 500 folds. That's just the news that's coming out now. So in other words, instead of calling it a school, they want to call it a madrasa. And then they want religious studies taught in a madrasa. The problem is, which religious interpretation are you teaching? So fortunately, some of the madrasa principals that we know were already getting they were already getting trained in the material that we have. And last time that I did a training, co-trained for 100 madrasa women, they asked me if I could actually create an app out of these rights. In other words, they want to have all these rights on their phone, on their smartphone. So it's possible that we can take some of these rights, get the key ones, and make a quick application out of it. So they always have these arguments with them. Because what is happening in Afghanistan is the Taliban is trying to act like they're all religious, like, oh, everything has to be Quran, everything has to be Sharia. But then they're also saying, oh, if you disagree with us, come bring your proof with you. So what's happening is we have all the proof. That's why I'm trying to do all these trainings right away. So some of those madrasa women who are frantically busy have actually reached out to our partner and said, can you also include some other courses? Because they are teaching rudimentary Islamic studies, rudimentary meaning, like basic Quranic memorization, basic how to read the Quran, pray, and all this other stuff. But then they have to become a school. And for them to become a school, they need more content. And they don't have time to develop all that all by themselves. So one of the things one of the professors said to me, principal said to me, she said, I don't want to learn this when I'm 30 years old. I want to learn this when I'm 9 years old. And she said, the stories that you're telling us of all the Muslim women, we've never even heard of them. She said, everything would change if we knew their stories. So one woman said, can you create a children's book? So there are endless possibilities. We have to be patient in Afghanistan because things aren't going to happen quickly. But we have to think of the long term. Like we have to plant the seeds now so that when change occurs, political change occurs, then women will be ready to, in other words, we can't waste their minds right now. So a lot of homeschooling is taking place now. So people have retreated. And some people have to give up the professions they're working on and start whole new professions. This is the sad part. But I am keeping my eye on the ball. I'm like, let's just keep educating women. Even if they are literally getting a Zoom for 1 hour, they're learning something new. So yeah, I'm working with UNAMA, which is the United Nations in Afghanistan. I'm working with all their networks of people. And by the way, the people that come on are not just women. There are a lot of men that come on. They want to know because they want to fight for women's rights. They have daughters.
That's right. Yeah, in fact, that was the most important thing that defeated the Taliban the first time, was the participation of men against them. I wanted to just ask one other question related to this. Our mutual friend has won international awards for her work with imams in exactly this area, women's rights. But they were getting killed, several of those imams, for preaching.
Yeah.
Is that still going on? And do you know what the fate is of these imams who are enlightened and want to be able to incorporate women's rights into their their?
Well, when I went there, I met with a bunch of them. And they told us that these guys, we know who these guys are. They know nothing about religion because the seminaries they went to didn't teach them anything. So they know that they have an upper hand. As long as they have their constituents and their mosques and the people that they can influence, they are continuing that. But they also have to be very careful. But the Taliban cannot go against all and each and every one of the imams, right? They can't kill all of them, because they are riding on this notion that they have, religious authority. So if you start killing all these religious leaders, it's going to have an impact on the grassroots community themselves, because they don't have influence all over the country. They have influence only in certain provinces, right? In the rural areas. In the cities, they can't have any influence. That's why they're trying to do this enforcement from the top, because they can't get into the grassroots. The grassroots just doesn't agree with them. So the imams have to be careful, but they've also asked us, hey, where's all that training you were giving us? Why don't you beef it up? Why don't you do more? And we're like, okay, you guys are already converted. We need to go to the women who are running the madrasas now, because those are the women that are going to be influencing young girls, and they're going to be taking in. So a lot of the students that are no longer in schools, regular schools, the parents don't want them sitting at home. They're putting them into the madrasas. They're like, go learn anything. Just learn something, right? So the problem is those schools are going to be very parochial and very conservative, and they're going to teach girls socialize girls in a certain way, right? But they will at least receive an education. If I can get in there quietly with little things where, I can share some stories and have some impact and leave some impression in somebody's mind, then we would have done something rather than nothing at all.
Bravo to you, Daisy.
This is like the suffragettes. I just saw a show on the South show. I mean, some of the things that were happening at that time, what they were saying about women when they go out on the streets, they're like, they're going against the state, that a woman's voice shouldn't be heard. All that stuff is the same arguments that Taliban is using right now.
It's hard for that stuff to die,
It's
unfortunately.
really hard. It just keeps coming back.
Bad penny.
Okay.
So much.
Anything from any of the students?
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Daisy. Yeah, I want to ask the students, any who would like to speak, please unmute yourself and I can help you unmute. Or if you want to write it on the chat, that's okay as well.
Yeah,
Please
my
feel
chat
free.
is open so I can see your questions.
Yeah. Does anybody want to make a comment or have a question for Daisy?
Maybe we can just do the hand up.
Yeah, you can raise your hand if you would like to speak, or just go ahead and speak. If we don't have many who were raising.
Oh,
their
did we
hands.
leave everybody speechless?
Well, usually.
Hey, young people, I know you have questions.
Yeah, sometimes we need to encourage them, as I do my classes. Yeah. Yeah. If not, then I was gonna just I have a comment.
Oh, yeah, so if there's no questions, so this is what the book, let me just do a quick book
Okay.
share. So this is what the book looks like, 30
Yeah.
Rights of Muslim Women. It's soft cover, so you can put it in your backpack or something. I made it deliberately soft cover. It's available in Kindle, and it's not an audiobook, and it's available on Amazon. And if any of you want to get involved in anything, if you have internship, you want to do an internship, call me. I do run a nonprofit. So we are developing a lot of tools for this right now. And if you'd like to get involved, you're welcome to get involved. And if you want to have access to the toolkits, let me know. We'll put you on the email. So when the toolkit is ready to go, you will get an email from us, and also for the podcast. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out that you can spread around to your friends, to your colleagues, and also use in your own work.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
There's a question here. I have a question about how to handle Orthodox women who are less open to exploring scripture, going against ingrained beliefs. Oh yeah, well, this is actually the crux of the book is all about what does the scripture say, and then what does a local custom or a tradition say. And so I always show that in Islamic law, a custom or a belief, a set of beliefs or customs or traditions cannot violate the scripture, because then you're violating God's word, right? So, so every article pretty much addresses that. This is right now the Taliban will tell you, it's our custom, it's our way of life. This is our culture. So in other words,
It's our tradition. Yeah.
Yeah, the tradition. So we have to assume that their tradition is more weighty than God's word. So we all actually have to go back and say, no, that's not how it works. The highest authority is the Quran. And if you can argue against the Quran, then be my guest. But this is, and then the second is what the Prophet said. So you have to challenge that. And so whether you're Orthodox or you're conservative or Salafi or any other type of Muslim who's doing that, you have the challenges. And that's why I wrote this book specifically so you have those arguments and the tools to come back and argue with somebody. That's really the crux. That question that you just asked is the crux of the matter. Thank you asking questions.
Yeah, that's a very important point.
And it's, by the way, in every religion. It does not only happen in
Absolutely.
Islam, it happens in every religion.
Ni'mat Barzanji, came up with this idea of self-learning of Islam. And even though it's a strong and sound argument, but it has been also criticized as something very elite. That only those women who are very well versed in the religion can do that, but can they teach others? So that was one way, but I think your book is very practical.
Yeah, I wrote it so that it is accessible and practical. And like I said, it's not a page turner. You won't go from page 1 all the way to the end. You just pick the article that you need. You have utility, you're hearing something, you are dealing with something. I mean, I would be surprised if things are not addressed in this book, because we scoured everything that needed to be scoured. So yeah, so this is not just rights, there's also issues. Some of these are actually issues that take place. The cultural issues I've not included, some of the things we're dealing with in today's time. The book would be a completely different book, but it is focused on. And Ni'mat Barzanji did give me a really nice blurb, and she really liked it. She said, by linking historical legacies to contemporary Muslim women's scholarship and activism, she empowers each woman to self-identify with Quranic justice and fairness, and by providing new perspectives of the Quran while debunking misinterpreted traditions attributed Prophet Muhammad. She explores women's realities, embarking with them upon a journey of restoring their rights and transforming their own lives. So it's about taking ownership of what you learn from this and getting inspired by something and just running with it. And it's personally for a Muslim, it could be for a woman of faith. I had a Jewish woman, a rabbi, who read this book, and she said, oh my God, why didn't I think of doing this for my religion? Right. And so now she's thinking, oh, so that's what my podcast is going to bring, some of these different guests from different
many cross-cultural issues that,
yeah, so comparisons, if we have common stories, we're going to explore that from all different angles, and we're going to have an interesting conversation. So the podcast is not meant to be a monologue of me speaking.
Absolutely. And when you spoke about that woman who told you she wished she learned that when she was 9 years old, you reminded me of one session of my Quran text and women class. At that time, we didn't have any Zoom, but there was Skype, and I hosted Asma Barlas. She was talking to my students on Skype, and I told her about when I was a Fulbright scholar at the American University of Kuwait. And I talked about women's rights in the Quran, and when a student said, "Why are these women?" I'm talking about Amina Wadud, Asma Barlas, and all of the others. Why are they writing in English? I want my mother to know this because she doesn't read English. She reads only Arabic. So I told Asma Barlas, during the class, and she said, "Well, let them translate it. I write in English, so have them translate these books." And that's one way as well. And I'm sure there are many Arabic books as well, but Muslim American women have been more, unfortunately coming forward with those, interpretations of the Quran.
Yeah, well, there's a whole English-speaking world out there.
Yes.
So whether I go to Saudi Arabia, or I go to Dubai, or I go to India, or I go to any other part of the world, Gambia, there's an English-speaking audience that is Absolutely. Very progressive. The activists tend to be English-speaking. So there's a lot of people we can influence just with the English language. And then it's up to them then to take it. So I work with my partners. I work through my partners. So I will be working with women in Gambia and turn over all my toolkits to them. Then they can do all the translations and do all the work like I did with that activist who ran with the FGM. I was not involved in her work. She just had the research. She had all the arguments, the kind of stuff that's really hard to do in an atmosphere that is politically charged. You can't do that. And so I have all the freedoms to sit in America. Nobody's looking over my shoulder. I can read every book. I can order anything. So I have the freedom to to breathe and to come up with all these insights. And if I give them a prepackaged document and say, this is what I have in English, now you take it and you train all your people, and that's how we're going to be able to create this change.
And
It's like,
which is
like a
which-
seminary of networks.
absolutely, which will be a very definitely effective approach. Well,
Thanks
at
so
this
much.
point, as we are coming to an end, I'd like
Mhm.
to thank you very much indeed, Dr. Daisy Khan, for this very insightful, session today and the discussion. And congratulations again on your book. And we look forward to having you in person sometimes again. I remember when you came here in 2016, and you gave a wonderful workshop for students, actually.
I would love to do that
Hopefully we
again.
can do
Yeah.
that again. Yes.
There's nothing like in person. Nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
So
Thank you all very much. And all of you who did not speak, I know that you have many pressures and many things going on, but if you do read the book and you like some things, do send me a note. You have my email, because I'd love to hear your feedback.
And they're going to write to me, at least one page about this lecture. So I'm
Oh, that's
wishing so
great.
much.
I would love to hear that. I would love to get that.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you
Professor
very much
Souad, thank you
indeed.
so much for inviting me.
You
Okay.
are most welcome.
Bye-bye, everyone. Take
Been a
care.
pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And
Bye-bye.
we invite you to our other events, and we'll send you, information about that. Thank you very much indeed.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye,
Daisy.
everyone.
Bye-bye.